sports fans. Your favorite sportsbook, BetUS.com, is back for our 28th year of NFL action. With the industry's biggest sign-up bonus of up to 200%, BetUS offers our members the opportunity to cash in on all your favorite sports, including NFL, NBA, MLB, and more. We've also got hundreds of new casino games, including the coolest new European slots, and our live dealers are waiting for you at the table. Sign up at BetUS.com today to get into the action. BetUS, where the game begins.
And now, broadcasting live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts now.
Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. We are close to the end of the week here on a Thursday, live from Denver, Colorado. This is the Snake Sports Talk Show. Wherever and however you may be watching and listening, thanks for making us part of your evening. Chase, of course, the co-host and partner in crime, joining us.
Yes, sir.
Joe tonight, because there's lots to talk about. We got Justin Garcia from Locked On Bucks talking about Giannis and the state of the Milwaukee Bucks here, joining us here tonight. We got former offensive tackle from the Vikings, Dolphins, and the Baltimore Ravens, Super Bowl champion and Pro Bowler Bryant McKinnie joining us. And then finally, Gabby Maljanian for Locked On Red Sox to talk about the latest call-up of Roman Anthony. I'm excited about this one here tonight, but Chase, is it easy to say when it comes to winning an NBA title, like having a bench is important? And we just saw that from TJ McConnell last night with the Pacers, and it just really showed they were on it last night.
Yeah, I would say that as well. I mean, I would say that having a bench is definitely important, but in terms of the four major sports, and correct me if I'm wrong, I would say that the NBA championship is the easiest one to win out of all four of the championships that there is, because in baseball you could have, you could have things going for you, but it's so unpredictable. You could have the best team in the entire league and still lose in the World Series. You could have, one team every year, or like a different team every year, make it for, football. And then for the NHL, you don't know who's going to make it because of how good they are. It's going to be interesting. I'm excited for how the show is tonight. We've got a guest speaker for basketball, baseball, and football. And hopefully McKinnie can teach me some a thing or two on how to become an NFL GM there. So later on in the show, guys.
Absolutely, man. But I will tell you, to kind of recap of last night's game, because again, this is why when it comes to NBA, finals, and when it comes to winning a title, this is why you got to have a consistent bench. Now, my only thing is when it comes to winning an NBA title, I don't deem it to be the easiest title to win, only because there's a certain line of skill that you got to possess. That's why, when you watch Tyrese Halliburton, you watch Pascal Siakam, and you watch from coming off the bench, TJ McConnell do what they did. They gave you points, they gave you minutes, and they also helped you to spread the floor and attack the perimeter. And that's exactly what the Pacers do. But the one thing about this is OKC, what their problem is that it wasn't that SGA didn't have a bad night. The problem is he was guarded. He was guarded in the most important spots. And that's what becomes a difference maker. So once you saw that last night, and then once again, as much as I like Chet Holmgren, and he's young, and he's productive, and he's somebody that has a bright future. But in spots like this, where you really need to be clutch, and you also need to be able to come up with something that's going to help your team grab the lead and keep the lead. That's the one thing that I know kind of gets a little bit inconsistent. But this is part of the whole growth process. Both these teams are young. Both these teams have really good, bright futures. And this is the one thing that becomes the difference maker. That's why a lot of teams, when they're all saying, well, you got a superstar, and the only thing is you have him, you're going to win a title. That's not necessarily true, because if you could win a title with just one star, then Kobe would have had more rings. MJ would have probably had more rings. Even LeBron James could have had more rings. But you got to have a support system, and that's the difference maker. Kobe had Shaq and had Pau Gasol. Michael Jordan had Scottie Pippen, and he also had a very good rotation and bench. It was important because that's the stuff that keeps the consistency, and then not to mention everybody plays a role. So in the Pacers situation, everybody played their role. Tyrese Halliburton sets the tone. Everybody else follows. And TJ McConnell, how about that guy? I mean, he literally put up the good amount of points that you needed. And even if the Pacers were trailing with where they were, it didn't matter to them because they were controlling the game. And Kevin McHale, who we know has been in these positions before as both player and coach, he's got a lot of experience on his belt. That's why the Pacers get the confidence there. Now, OKC, I mean, being down in the series doesn't mean that you're completely out unless something happens or unless you got the inconsistency, the best of you. But that's where they really have to change that. Now, we know that they split up at home, but you're on the road in Indiana. You can't afford to go 0-2 on the road and now have your backs against the wall where you're going to have to come home and you got to end up taking a game to at least stay alive in the series. But the Pacers, they controlled the time, they controlled the possession, and even if they were trailing, that didn't matter to them. They were going to end up figuring it out, executing situations, and then sure enough, a consistent bench like what we saw last night was the difference maker. That's the stuff that wins NBA titles. It's not particularly the star leading the charge. It's everybody. It's their Robin, it's their X factor, and it's their bench. And ultimately, you also got to factor in the coach. If the coach is putting together all of the scheme fit for all of the players to go and play their role, that becomes the difference maker. But Kevin McHale's been in this position before, and he's won a title. He's won multiple titles as a player, and and he understands the situation. So I think the Pacers, they just know how to overcome adversities. They know how to control it. And for OKC, they too, as a young team, they're trying to figure this out as best as possible. But doesn't mean that they're going to be perfect. Those are going to be situations where you're going to end up facing that. You're going to have to be prepared for it. And if they come back into the series, then that just means it only took a little bit of time to figure it out. And then, hey, we got ourselves a series from there. Like I said, it could be 6, could be 7, but it's been entertaining for the most part. So it's going to be an interesting offseason for sure. And one team in particular that we've been paying attention to and what's been kind of buzzing around is the Milwaukee Bucks and with Giannis, because there's lots of question marks, like just kind of hitting all around. So to join us to talk a little more about the Milwaukee Bucks and what the status of the situation is here this offseason, Justin Garcia joins us here, Locked On Bucks. Correct me if I'm wrong, Justin, but like what I saw last night, and this is what's important, and the funny thing of it is, the Milwaukee Bucks, when they won their title, this is what was important to them. You had to have the right role players, and you had to have guys that were going to step up in clutch situations where they controlled the clock, they controlled the opportunities that they saw when it came to opening up and spreading the perimeter and then getting the much-needed shots and then keeping the leads. That is what makes a team win a title from there, because of all of those things coming together. I mean, last night was a perfect example of why you needed to have a consistent bench. I mean, is that kind of just the secret sauce to some of these teams to win a title?
Well, I mean, I think, and after the Pacers beat the Bucks in the first round for a second consecutive season, we were talking about it on our show, and I work on the Bucks radio network too, and was talking about it on another show, in that I just think the Pacers are going to win the East when you look at how they're structured and coming into this series. part of it was you wanted to be the outlier, and like it's boring to just say, hey, I think the Thunder are going to win in 5. But another part of it is seeing what this team was able to do to the Bucks, to the Cavs, to the Knicks, and the style that they play, that I legitimately thought the Pacers are going to win this series. And to me, the big thing is I agree with your points on the structure of the team and what you look for in the playoffs. But the biggest thing with this Pacers team is they just don't have a glaring weakness. And I think that's what we're moving into in this new era of the NBA, where super teams are basically dead. And there's been so much talk about aprons and the CBA. I think the big thing in team building now is you need to minimize your weaknesses. You can't have one glaring thing that teams can pick at. You can talk about Tyrese Halliburton and knocks on him defensively. He's made some pretty big defensive plays throughout this series. So to me, the biggest thing that stands out about the Pacers, not just the style that they play and how, as we get further removed from 2 days off in between games, even if you're young, that style wears on you. But it's also that there's not one area you can look at and say, well, this is the advantage. This is where we can really beat up on Indiana.
Yeah, no, and that's the one thing is like, they're both a young team. They're both kind of going through these growing pains, right? Because initially they're both fighting for their first NBA title in franchise history. But I think, and it's kind of funny, before we dig in deep about the Milwaukee Bucks, this is kind of the look of what Adam Silver's NBA is looking like, because he wants parity in the league, right? So what it means is that you got a lot of these small market teams that are trying to grow. They're trying to, produce as many of these young players as possible. But the hardest part is because you and I, we've watched it. We've seen a lot of, the Miami Heat and the LA Lakers and the Boston Celtics, winning the amount of titles and getting into the big show for many times as possible for as much as I can remember watching basketball. But then when I start to watch teams like the Thunder and Pacers, it's kind of a little bit interesting to adjust to. But for diehard basketball fans, we love it, because the fact of it just shows that, like, this is something new. This is interesting. It's not so much of the big money markets that we're always used to seeing be in these big positions, but it does take a little bit of adjusting to. But I just think with Adam Silver, he's trying to put parity in the league, but it's not going to be as easy as it comes, right? Because this is going to be the stuff that might adjust here in the next couple of years down the road if it kind of goes to what he's trying to put into fruition.
Well, I mean, I think the only adjustment is in the next CBA, because with what we've seen here, I think it's pretty clear now that you have 3 years. That is your window. And I mean, you can make a case that the Thunder's year one was last year, not this season, because Shea is going to be due within the next 12 months for the richest contract in NBA history. Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams are making a combined $20 million this year. So, next offseason is the conversation that Boston is going through now of, okay, now it's time to pay these guys. And you probably have to break up some deals where we make a lot of 2-for-1 trades just because we have this surplus. So yeah. I do think that's largely here to stay. And, all the talk, even with this Thunder team, of this is the next dynasty. Number one, we jumped the gun on that, as they're 2 losses away from not even getting that first championship. But I just, the Thunder, sure, they have the best chance of doing it of any team we've seen recently, but it's going to be near impossible with this CBA and how tough it is to keep teams together.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's why I think, come this off season, it's going to be really interesting, because there's going to be such movements that, especially when constructing a roster and then putting together all the right pieces of some teams that kind of missed, a pivotal piece that could have taken them up over the top. So, thinking about this for the Milwaukee Bucks is, and you've covered this team for as long as you have. And my biggest thing with the Bucks is right after they won the NBA title, right, with Mike Budenholzer at the time, I just think, this team with Giannis, they really made their mark to where they got another NBA title under their belt in the franchise. But something seems to be kind of off with this team. And I don't know what it could be in particular, because once they let Budenholzer go and then they get Adrian Griffin, I was like, well, they're second in the East. It seems like this team's kind of up and on the right track. But then once they moved on from him and get Doc Rivers, I'm just trying to figure out, because there's a bit of some inconsistencies up from here. I can't pinpoint it, myself. But when I look at this, because I love Giannis, I really do. But I also try to look at the construction of the roster and try to pinpoint it to where this team can get back into the finals again and maybe even make a bigger impact. Looking at what the Bucks had done this past season, Justin, is there kind of something you've pinpointed what they need to do better going into next year and potentially make that push?
Well, what they need to do is the way they closed the season in that 8-game win streak, and then the things that worked against the Pacers, that group of players, that's the model for how they need to play go forward. Now, the big challenge there is, taking the Giannis conversation that it's not going to go away. It's seemingly, and there's a lot of fatigue in Milwaukee of, man, we're going through this again when he's never given any indication he wants to leave. But it's not going to exit anytime soon. I mean, next summer, it's going to be the same thing where he's 1 year closer to being a free agent then. But taking him out of it, Bobby Portis has a player option. And if you asked me a year ago, I would say, well, there's definitely more money out there for Bobby Portis than the 12 or 13 million he's making this year. But the fact that not a whole lot of teams have cap space, and we just talked about, the different approach teams are taking to building out their roster. And do you want to shell out close to $20 million for a Bobby Portis type, or is that reserved for a younger player that's a two-way guy that you develop on your own? I'm not sure. Gary Trent Jr. was a very, very valuable piece, especially down the stretch for the Bucks. He's a free agent, and he's a guy that you got for the veteran minimum last year. You're not going to get him for that figure this year. Kevin Porter Jr., a lot of things in his background off the court that kind of led him to the Bucks and the ability to become available in that trade, but he showed you flashes too. So you found pieces that work. And I think that's the big thing too, is what the Bucks had to lean into those last 8 games. And, even though they didn't win in that playoff series against the Pacers, was essentially using Giannis similar to how Denver uses Nikola Jokic, where it's just everything's going to run through this guy. You saw him start to rack up triple doubles and put up some massive stat lines in the regular season and playoffs, but this is how we're going to play. And it's not just surround Giannis with shooters. We got another guy that's kind of my turn, your turn. It's everything is going through Giannis, but now you got a lot of questions with your free agents and keeping those guys. I do think the Bucks do feel really good about their chances to retain every one of those names that I mentioned. And the big thing too is, as long as you have Giannis, you have a chance. And everybody that's made the point of, hey, maybe the Bucks should look into trading Giannis. I mean, number one, I can confidently say the organization is never going to say it's time to trade this guy. It would have to be a Giannis saying, we tried, but it's time to move on here. I think the thing that most people don't understand is, number one, you're not going to get the value back that Giannis has for you, but it's stuff like that too. Like guys like Gary Trent Jr., they're willing to stay here and play for the Bucks as long as Giannis is here. When he leaves, Milwaukee is no longer a destination. It's no longer an attraction for players to come to. We saw that for decades. This was a basketball wasteland until Giannis arrived. And, the Fiserv Forum that the Bucks play in, that arena doesn't get built. The Bucks are probably not in Milwaukee if they don't draft Giannis and Giannis doesn't ascend to the levels that he has, because before Giannis, there was no interest, and I'm not being hyperbolic, no interest outside of Milwaukee in the state of Wisconsin, in the Bucks. And now you see it's not a state team to the level of the Packers, but it's become much more of a state team. So that's the other thing in that, it's the value of him as an individual player, but it's the value that he brings certainly financially to the franchise and community, but also those other things. When we talk about how do you fill out a roster, it's easier to convince guys, and we've seen the Bucks do this for the last 4 years, to basically find 2 guards off the scrap heap and say, well, you get to play next to Giannis and you're going to have a lot of catch and shoot threes.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's funny because I said this a couple years ago and it's funny you make this point because I even said the same exact thing. This team would not even be in Milwaukee if it wasn't for Giannis. Because to me, I felt like this team could have relocated to Vegas because knowing you have the summer leagues, and now they're stamping their mark and on the sports market because of the Raiders and the Golden Knights. And it's like the NBA market could have literally exploded. But because of Giannis being there, it gave them a viable chance, which really kind of, saved more of just the fan base, the culture, and so much more. And it's funny you mentioned this with guards, because here's the thing. I love Damian Lillard. I really, really do. And I do believe he still has enough left in the tank to really contribute for this Bucks roster. But my only concern about this is because he is getting up in age, and we know injuries can play a pivotal factor for a team's season. When you look at Dame and when he suffered up the injury, that was kind of just a nick in the armor. And when I look at that, how will Damian Lillard really bounce back this upcoming season? Because this has got to be something that Milwaukee's really paying attention to closely, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was the being in the building for game 4 when that injury occurred. It was the most deflating feeling that we've experienced in the city in quite some time. When Giannis got injured in the conference finals, there's a similar feeling, but that was in Atlanta, and that was a time when we were broadcasting remotely for games, so I wasn't there for that. But you got that kind of pit of like, oh man, now you're going to have to monitor this, and maybe it's a lost season coming up. But with the Dame one, you took game 3 and you felt like, okay, you're back at home, and now you're going to make this a series, because there was a lot of confidence within that locker room too. They are going to beat the Pacers. We're a different team than we were a year ago. And then when he went down, it was just like somebody let all the air out of the balloon, and you could feel it in there. And there's no way the players didn't feel that as well. Doc Rivers after the game talking about, and you could sense it just emotionally wiped the team to see that happen. I'm not going to doubt Damian Lillard to see the work that he puts in. And as you mentioned, the type of player that he is, but there are some things that you can't avoid when you look at the age, how significant of an injury that this is for anyone, but especially somebody that age, somebody that size, and somebody that's going to rely on the burst that Damian Lillard does to still be able to get into the paint and collapse defenses and find open shooters. So I don't know. I think that's the most curious thing to see. Number one, when does he come back? I think you have to go in with the assumption you're not going to have Damian Lillard play next season. If you get him, great, but you can't hey, maybe he can come back after the All-Star game. Again, if there's anybody that can do it and come back quickly, it's Dame with the work that we've seen him put in. But I just think you have to be realistic with this, with his age. And that's the other tough part where the Bucks are kind of saddled right now is, the phrase gap year that's come up quite a bit. Going back to what you mentioned about the coaching changes, when they hired Doc Rivers at the press conference where they kind of combined them, and John Horst spoke talking about the firing of Adrian Griffin and bringing in Doc Rivers, he had said that without saying and using the words gap year, he basically said they were going into that season kind of viewing it as a gap year and ready to take a step backward. And everyone in the room kind of scoffed at that and thought there's no way that's the case. They didn't get Damian Lillard until over late fall. It was a week before training camp started. And, now I think you can look back at it and say, well, I don't know, maybe. And that's the other big learning from this CBA is teams like the Bucks, you're getting up there now with the Cavs, teams like the Jazz back in the day. You would just keep pouring everything into that roster that you had and keep pushing all the chips further and further out there. And now I just don't think that's going to be possible anymore. That I think you're going to see teams recognize and say, all right, we got to make this a gap year and we have to kind of recoup something. And then we can start to push it in a year or two again. But that's what makes it even more interesting with Dame is when does he come back? What does he look like when he comes back? And why I think you keep hearing gap year coming up, even as we said, the Bucks feel pretty confident they're going to retain most of those names and obviously keep Giannis, but you're still going to have a $54 million anchor on your roster that, is going to miss at the very least 3/4 of the season.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Final question here before we move on, because we know the NBA draft is right around the corner. And it was interesting how things really panned out, right? Because I think I was saying this on the show a couple weeks ago. this is the fourth time. Maybe there's been more times this has happened where a team, they let go of a star. The star moves on. So we've seen LeBron James move on from Cleveland to Miami before he returned back. And the Cleveland Cavaliers get the number 1 overall pick, and they get Kyrie Irving. Then we watch Anthony Davis move from New Orleans to go to the Lakers, and they get Zion. And I know what you're thinking, because a lot of people all thought, man, this thing's rigged. And the minute that Luka gets traded from Dallas to the Lakers, Dallas gets the number 1 overall pick, and they could potentially get Cooper Flagg. I thought of it this way, Justin, and I live here in Denver. We're very notorious for scratch tickets. And that's what I feel like the NBA draft lottery's become. It's a scratch ticket type of thing.
Yeah.
Not a lot of percentages are guaranteeable. It's not like the NFL where you could have a losing season, but you get the top 10 every year, and those guys are ready to play by day one. So looking at the Bucks and coming into the NBA draft, is there a position they really want to address? At least somebody that can really make an impact in the next 3 years or so that can help the Milwaukee Bucks and contribute, especially with the tenure with Giannis still being there.
Yeah, well, and they only have a second-round pick right now. And, I mean, that's basically the story for the Bucks from now until 2030, that they have a pick swap, or they owe their first-rounder this year to the Pelicans in that Drew Holiday trade. They have a pick swap with the Pelicans next year, which, you know, even if you have a gap year, you may be picking in right around the same spot, so that's not really going to factor in. And then you got one more to New Orleans, and then you have a first rounder and a pick swap with the Blazers for the Dame trade. So the Bucks, in terms of assets, it's not until 2031 that they can make any trades involving a first rounder. And that same year is when they get a second rounder back in the mix. I do wonder, though, you know, when you look at teams like Brooklyn, for example, that I think has 4 first rounders and they're all lumped in the teens, basically. I don't think Brooklyn is going to draft 4 guys in the first round. And I don't think there's going to be an appetite for somebody that's drafted in the top 5 to say, sure, we'll take 2 of your first rounders for this. So I do wonder, because it's not just the Nets, there's a handful of teams that have multiple picks. If we're going to see teams essentially selling a first rounder, and then if that's the case, teams like the Bucks and teams that have mortgaged some of their future can get in the mix and say, we'll buy a first round pick and we'll get in there and find a player that can help us out down the road. If that's the case, they obviously need a big, because I don't think Brook Lopez is going to be back. He's been very polarizing with Bucks fans. Obviously, he's 37 years old and he plays a certain style of play, but I think he's shown he still has a lot of value. And I think he's going to leave because he has value. And other teams are going to be, hey, this is the final piece that we need for our defense. So if he leaves, your bigs, Jericho Sims, flashed a lot of, signs to say, okay, this guy's pretty good defensively, that you can do some things with him. Playing alongside Giannis is going to be a challenge because of his lack of offense. So your bigs would just be, if you keep Jericho Sims, Giannis, and if Bobby Portis is back, him. So you're going to need some big depth. And we've been talking about it for at least 5 years. What does life after Brook Lopez look like? At some point, you got to address that. You would think it's with a younger guy that you can develop. So I think that would stick out as number one. But, the other learnings that I think you have from the playoffs is you need creators and guys that can handle the ball, because it wasn't as bad this past season. The year before, the Bucks ball handlers were basically Damian Lillard, Chris Middleton, and Giannis. So if one of those guys didn't have the ball, the Pacers were trapping and pressuring them, and you saw a lot of turnovers. You got to get further and further away from that. So I think the big needs are a big, and then just more guys that, not necessarily point guards, but just guys that can handle the ball and initiate offense.
Yeah, 100%. I'm just really curious what this team, they're going to do this offseason. Maybe
I will say this. I don't think they're going to sit on their hands. I mean, I think, and look, the Dame injury is one thing, but what you cannot understate is, as beloved as Chris Middleton was, and look, the trade on the court did not work out, to at least last year, what you got in Kyle Kuzma. But it opened up a lot of things because it got you under the second apron and it got you a little more cap flexibility. If they don't make that trade and Damian Lillard still suffers that injury, then I do wonder what the future is like for Giannis. And if we have a different conversation, because then you're a second apron team once again, where all you've got is veteran minimums that you can dole out to try to reshape this roster. And, other guys see that too. And guys like Gary Trent and Bobby Portis say, you know what? I don't think it's going to happen here. I think we're ready to move on. So I do think they're going to be very active. And, that's what we've seen in John Horst, is that even though it didn't work out, Jay Crowder, you kept mentioning that name of, could they get Jay Crowder? You didn't think they had enough to get him. They did. Same with PJ Tucker, where they traded DJ Wilson and draft picks to get PJ Tucker. And Dame, everybody started mentioning that name late in the offseason and kept thinking, yeah, I would love to see Dame with Giannis, but the Bucks don't have the assets to get Dame. And they did. Drew Holiday, same story. So there's been all these moves that you would look at and say, I just don't think the Bucks could offer the best package. And yet they end up with the guy. So I do think John Horst is going to have something cooking once again this offseason.
Yeah, it should be interesting. Justin, appreciate you for coming on by, man. Where can people find you? Tapping on in for our audiences here, getting locked in on the Milwaukee Bucks this season.
Yeah, you mentioned it, the Locked On Bucks podcast. You can find me there all season long. Justin Garcia, NBA on Twitter, and then during the season on the Bucks Radio Network.
All right. Appreciate it, man. Have a great rest of the week, man, and we shall see what the Bucks do this offseason, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Anytime.
Absolutely. All right. We are moving in fast. We're turning two, as usual, as a baseball fan. So moving on real quick to here. Funny story of it was I recently had watched the Yankees and Red Sox rivalry, and that's always been my favorite. And so perfect timing, of course, too, because of calling up the number one prospect, Roman Anthony. And to talk more about that, Gabby Maljanian joining us here, Locked on Red Sox. A funny story, Gabby, because listen, I was on a date night with my wife and we go to Olive Garden, and of course, right there on the bar side, you have the dual TVs. On one side, I'm looking on the left, and there is literally grown men pillow fighting. And I'm just like looking over like, what the hell? And then on the right side, I look over, I'm like, oh, thank God, it's Yankees Red Sox. And I'm just like, at least the night can be mostly enjoyable. But thinking about that, because I love rivalries in Major League Baseball more than anything. And that's the one thing that I think is the product you could produce out so much. So watching that series and then watching just the game in general, I mean, I can never get enough of it. It's the classic rivalry between the two. And looking at this Boston team, it's young. They're trying to get a spark in the lineup and then really kind of making that push from what last year they closed up on. And so, what's kind of been like the focal point for the Red Sox, especially with the start of the season?
Yeah, there's definitely been a lot of things that have not been going as well for the Red Sox as I think a lot of people would have hoped that it would. I mean, they finally spent money this past off season, and that was something that they hadn't really done much of the last few off seasons. They went and spent money on Alex Bregman, who was the best hitter on the team prior to getting injured. And he's a veteran who has experience winning. So putting him with a lot of young players has been really good for this team. And then they went out and got Garrett Crochet and then extended him. They made moves to help improve this team. They got Aroldis Chapman, who has been really shut down as a closer this year, really dominant for this Red Sox team. So you go out and make moves and you get guys that you assume are going to be big contributors. You assume the Red Sox are going to be rolling. A lot of people picked them to win the AL East this year. And then they go into the season and things just are not going as planned. And one of the biggest things that has caused that has been the struggles with the starting rotation as a whole. Outside of Garrett Crochet, everybody else has really been a question mark in the starting rotation. I mean, you have guys like Walker Buehler, who they also went out and got this offseason, Lucas Giolito, Brian Bayo. Those types of pitchers have been very inconsistent this year, and they also haven't been able to provide length. So them not being able to provide length naturally has caused the bullpen to be really gassed because those guys have to be used more and they're getting called into games earlier than they should be because they are stuck with starters who can't throw 5 innings a lot of the time. So that has just really led to a lot of frustration with this Red Sox team as a whole. is the fact that their pitching just hasn't been able to get it done. And that really has been something that has been driving me crazy, because it's the inconsistencies of this team. And another big thing that they've really struggled with is their defense. Their defense was very bad over the last couple seasons, worst in the sport last year, leading the league in errors. And then they go into this season, Alex Bregman, again, I bring him up because he was supposed to be somebody who was supposed to help improve the infield defense. You have Trevor Story, who's finally healthy, who is playing shortstop. And, his defense is something that he's always been known for throughout the course of his career. But the infield defense hasn't really improved that much. They've had their blunders this year on the defensive side of the ball, and that's caused a lot of frustration among the fan base. And it's really gotten to the point now where people are saying, well, what do we do? Is this on the coaches, or whose fault really is it that this team isn't performing to the level that we all expected them to so far this year?
It's interesting, and it's funny that you bring this up, because I mentioned this about the Red Sox a few months ago, because of course the conversation of it was surrounding Rafael Devers, because last year having the minus 24, run defense, especially up and in that infield, I'm like, I can understand why they went and got Alex Bregman, because I need somebody to cover the hot corner and really try to save up those runs that could have gotten you more wins last year. But when I look at Rafael Devers, it's like he's kind of stuck in his own way with this whole thing. You ain't moving me. And then all of a sudden, it's like, okay, look, you've got the bat, okay, which is important in this lineup, but we need defense, okay? And I think what really rubbed me the wrong way, I've been a baseball guy, it's been in my blood for years. My thing is, if you're becoming a defensive liability and you're not willing to hold yourself accountable to that and make the move to help benefit the team, I just don't understand it. And I'm like, you're contributing offensively, but defensively, we need help. How have you felt about that with this Rafael Devers thing? Because to me, I'll be honest, Gabby, that kind of thing, if I'm the GM, I'm making phone calls. I'm sorry, but I need to have somebody that can understand the build we're trying to do and trying to contribute. I'll find another offensive player on this roster, and talking about the prospect a little bit later on, but I need some help. I need to be able to save the runs that can turn into W's that were L's from last season, right?
Yeah, I think the thing with Rafael Devers is he is the franchise player on this team. He is the guy that they are building around. I mean, they gave him a massive contract extension, so he's here to stay, and he knows that. And I think he is kind of taking a little bit too much advantage of that, feeling like, oh, I can do what I want because the future of the team revolves around me. And initially, when it was brought up to him to move from third base to being a DH, he did not take that well. He said, third base is my position. I want to play defense. And as a result, they forced it on him to be a DH. And they said, we have Alex Bregman here who's going to start the season at third. In his defense, I don't think the front office really handled it as well as they could have, because they kind of sprung this on him and said, oh, by the way, we want you to DH. The front office could have handled this better by letting him know earlier on, we are exploring options at third base. We are active in the third base market. And then all of a sudden they get Bregman, who I quite frankly don't think the Red Sox thought was going to pick Boston. So I think that was part of it, was that him coming here was a surprise even to them, that he ended up agreeing that Boston was the spot he wanted to go. So then they had to go and say to Devers, you are our DH now. So in that sense, I do sympathize with Devers, because I would hate to be sprung something like that right before the season was starting. Like, by the way, you're basically hanging up your glove and not playing defense anymore. So I would be frustrated by that too. But at the same time, it is about doing what's best for the team. Like, if you want to win and you want to put yourself in the best position to have your team win and have your teammates continue to respect you, you kind of have to be a little bit more flexible when it comes to that. And I think one of the greatest examples of this is David Ortiz, who ended up in the Hall of Fame as a designated hitter for the Boston Red Sox. And if Devers really thinks about it, that could be him one day. And he wasn't a good defender to begin with. So
That's a great point. Yeah.
He was really struggling at third base defensively over the course of his career so far. So for him, I actually talked about it on my show. I said, it might be better for him if he doesn't have to focus on his defense and he just focuses on hitting, because mentally then he's in a different spot, because mentally if he makes an error at third base, that could affect his next at bat. Whereas now he's only focusing on the hitting side of it. And then he goes and starts the season terribly with a ridiculously bad stretch offensively. And I was like, is he trying to protest against the front office or something? But once he started adapting to being used to being a designated hitter and getting used to not having defense as part of his routine, he has been one of the best hitters in baseball since then. He's been really getting the job done offensively and giving the Red Sox what they need him to give them. And he's finally adapted to the fact that he is now the full-time DH. But then, they lost their first baseman, Tristan Casas, to a season-ending injury. So then they approached Devers again about moving to first base and saying, I know we didn't want you to play defense before, but now we kind of need you to play defense because Tristan Casas is hurt. So by the way, here, play first. He said no again. And I think that was to do with the fact that he was finally used to being a designated hitter and he didn't want to move to play defense in a role that he's not used to playing. And I never really loved the idea of Devers playing first because he already had struggled at third. So if you try to move him to first base and expect him to play good defense there, I don't know how well that would necessarily go. And I think they're in a better spot now with Abraham Toro playing first base with how well he's been playing than they would be if they tried to force that on Devers. And I think it would have impacted in a bad way his offense. So I think he's in a good spot now. And, where he's at now, I said, Devers, if you perform as a DH, people will forget eventually about the drama that you caused early on. And he's hitting well. And that's kind of what we need him to do, is continue to hit well. And, when Alex Bregman comes back, he'll go back to most likely playing third. And that'll all be a situation where the Red Sox just try to brush that under the bed and say this is water under the bridge at this point. And as long as Devers is performing with where he's playing, then we're fine. But I do think that this is the future with him. I think, Alex Cora has said multiple times he's our DH. And I think the Red Sox are good with him being their designated hitter moving forward for the rest of his time in Boston.
I am really happy that at least I found somebody that sees eye to eye with what I see with that, because I couldn't have said it better myself. But you made a great point. I'm glad I have this clipped, because that is going to be important, especially when I would have never thought about that, about, Big Papi, because he was the same way. And at least he became a Hall of Fame DH. Like, what's wrong with that? I never understood that. But a quick question before we move on to our next guest here on the show. So Roman Anthony gets called up, and we know that this is a young team with Marcelo Mayer, Jaron Duran, and multiple others that they're building up on this lineup. So I think it's interesting coming into, because we are in the hefty month now of June going into July. We know the trade market is going to be interesting to watch. Is there something kind of now with some of these rookie call-ups and really shaping up this roster? Does the Boston Red Sox have a plan here that maybe somewhere in this trade market they're kind of eyeballing that could help maybe get a boost either up and in their rotation, maybe get somebody important up and into the bullpen? What's been the latest buzz happening in the front office for the Red Sox come close to July?
Yeah, they're definitely an interesting spot right now because they're trying to feel out where they are at as a team. Can they turn things around or can they not? I mean, they've won 3 of their last 4 series, so they seemingly maybe are turning a corner a little bit. The optimistic Red Sox fan in me is hoping that. But they don't really know still right now whether it makes sense for them to be buyers or sellers fully at the trade deadline. I think they're still kind of figuring that out. But what I have heard is that they are looking to explore first base options. They want to kind of get a more permanent first baseman in there because it has been a lot of Abraham Toro playing that position, but they also have Romy Gonzalez, who has been platooning at first base a little bit with him. So I think they want to target a little bit more consistency there. And I know they also are looking for a lot of pitching help. And what they need to figure out is the outfield situation, because now they have Roman Anthony here. I mean, he's the top prospect in the sport. You don't really call up the top prospect in the sport to send him back down. And that's something that I think would really blow up in the front office's face if they said, oh, yeah, we know you guys have all been waiting to have Roman Anthony get called up, and now we call him up. Oh, by the way, we're sending him back down because Willie Abreu's back from the IL. So they have an overcrowded outfield situation right now. So what they are looking into right now is exploring trade options for a guy like Willie Abreu, who is injured right now, unfortunately. But when he comes back, because he does provide a lot of value offensively, he won a Gold Glove last year. So his defense also is up to par too. So to my understanding, they are going to be looking into opportunities to move him for some pitching and first base help at the trade deadline. And they're looking towards not just helping them this year, but also next year and beyond, because that way, then if it's a trade deadline in which they don't really feel like they're in contention or can make their way into contention, then the pieces that they are trying to acquire, they feel like can also help them for next season. So I know that there's been talks in the works regarding Willie Abreu. I know there are teams that have been interested. So they definitely, I expect, will at least try to move one of their outfielders, because there just isn't enough room for everybody right now. And if they want to keep Roman Anthony in the lineup every day, they are going to have to do that. But I do think the Red Sox at the trade deadline are going to emphasize and really enforce trying to get back pitching and a first baseman in whatever trades they do decide to pursue.
Interesting. Well, we'll see what happens come the trade deadline, but it should be an interesting one. But I know the Red Sox, they definitely want to make that push and make a big impact, and it's going to be important, especially come the important months of September and up in October as well. Gabby, appreciate you for coming on by, talking to Red Sox. Where can people find you to get clicked in and locked on with the Boston Red Sox this season?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. You can find Locked On Red Sox on YouTube or any other podcast platform. Just subscribe there. New episodes Monday through Friday, talking all things Boston Red Sox. You can all follow me on Twitter also at Gabby Maljanian, or on Instagram at Gabby_Maljanian10. And the show has a Twitter account as well at LO_Red Sox. So make sure that you follow me there. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, and I'll catch you Monday through Friday with the latest going on with this Boston Red Sox team.
Love it. Absolutely love all of your guys' work up in Locked On. You guys are always on it. You're locked in, you're locked on. And, it's very impressive work. So I've been very impressed with seeing it thus far. Gabby, appreciate you for coming on by. Enjoy the rest of the week, and good luck with the rest of the season for the Boston Red Sox. We will see you soon. All right. Well, I've saved the best for last, folks, and it's going to be an exciting one up from here. Played 11 seasons in the NFL, and now newly recognized into the Ring of Honor for the Miami Hurricanes, played with the Vikings, the Baltimore Ravens, and the Miami Dolphins as well. And to talking more about the Vikings situation, this is going to be interesting, but former offensive tackle Bryant McKinnie joins us here on the show. First of all, Bryant, congratulations on your recognition being in the Ring of Honor for the Miami Hurricanes. Are there some memorable moments you think about as now you're going into the Ring of Honor you like to kind of share with our audiences here to kind of reminisce on some of the years spending with Miami?
Just probably my journey just there, especially my junior year. Being part of the team, we lost the second game of the season, but went on and won the rest of my time there all the way through my senior year and went to a national championship. So definitely being able to win the national championship after having the opportunity to split it with our rivals, Florida State, the year before, and then just taking destiny in our own hand and going out and actually winning the following year was a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I to me, I've always loved watching, Miami football, even from the U in the 2000s, and then them producing so many great talents like yourself as well. It's always really impressed me, and that's why I'm excited for what Cam Ward is also going to do here in the NFL as the number 1 overall pick. So we're getting into the hefty things from here. You've played along with the Minnesota Vikings for the heftiness of your career. When I look at this offensive line, Bryant, and they addressed a lot. They get Ryan Kelly, they get Will Fries, and we know Christian Darrisaw coming back from injury is going to play a big role. But the huge question of it is this enough to help to solidify with the return of J.J. McCarthy? How have you really outlooked this as, playing the position yourself and being a part of the offensive line? How important that's going to be for the Vikings this upcoming season?
Very important, and I feel like they're putting everything into JJ. So you want to definitely get him some good insurance, which is the offensive line. I always look at the offensive line as like the engine in the car, and the receivers and the running backs are the wheels, and the quarterback is the driver. So to be able to have big guys up front who are pretty good, and I've seen that Darrisaw came back this week and has been practicing in minicamp, so that's good to see that he's back, so fast. So have those guys and they get, rhythm and getting used to playing with, next to each other. I feel like it's good for JJ, and it'll make him start to feel comfortable.
Absolutely. And this is kind of the thing. And I know there's been lots of buzzes, because we're kind of put in the mystery with what J.J. McCarthy is going to look like. We know he got injured, last year after a really impressive preseason game, and then to have him sidelined. But, I think of it this way. If he didn't have the opportunity to play last year in his quote unquote rookie season, this is the rookie season this year where we'll get a chance to see that. Now, some talks has been since coming back from the injury, there's some adjustments that's been involved, and mostly comfortability of the lower half itself, but then also kind of building that relationship with this offense. Looking at this, I always wish the best and successes for a lot of these young players in the league. JJ McCarthy's got an interesting situation because knowing the NFC North, and you played in it, it's tough. They're physical, they're more in the trenches, and even when you're facing Green Bay, Detroit, and Chicago twice a year, this is going to be an interesting challenge for JJ McCarthy. How would you outlook this going into this season where this would technically be your rookie season? Is there some pressure involved in how he can overcome that?
Well, he's going to see everything for the first time live, like in regular season. So there'll be some adjustments. I just think I'm glad to see that the offensive line is in play, and everybody's there present for the mini camps and stuff, so he can get timing and everything down. And the more time he has to practice with those guys, the running backs and receivers, the more comfortable he'll get, especially in these mini camps. And then getting into training camp is when it becomes a little more live with the full pads and everything. And he'll just have to get more and more comfortable with just reps, and just get to a space where he is in his playbook too, and studying film, because that'll give him a little edge as well.
I think the good thing of it is because he's also paired along with a very good coach in Kevin O'Connell that just gets the best out of, these quarterbacks. We've watched him even when, Kirk Cousins has been there, and even when you bring in Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins and even Sam Darnold. I mean, Darnold having a resurgent season for 1 year and then doing what he did here in Minnesota, where they were a 14-win team. I mean, that's got to really make you feel confident, especially with having Kevin O'Connell to really build together this offense, right?
Yeah, and I think Kevin O'Connell is very confident in his coaching style and be able to get quarterbacks, to feel comfortable and play at a high level. So I feel like he knows how to bring the talent out in that position. So I think that's why they also didn't mind putting, all the eggs in that one basket with JJ and saying, hey, this is our guy. We want to go with him. And now that he's recovered. So I think the fans are pretty excited to finally get to see JJ on the field. And, I mean, his teammates are as well.
Going into, your playing time in your career, playing up and in the offensive line, and how important that it is to establish that communication and relationship with your peers around you. I look at the Miami Dolphins, and here's my thing with this. Once I heard the news about Teron Armstead, this is going to be an interesting season for Miami. And to me, I feel like this is a year where guys are fighting for their job. Mike McDaniel and with Chris Greer. Once they heard the news about Teron Armstead retiring, it kind of felt like now there's a hole there. And I don't know how they're going to figure that out. But going into your career and playing on the tackle side, with the play style and then the importance behind that, is that kind of a challenge? Like thinking about it, because you're holding yourself accountable, and then you're also accounting for your quarterback that's right there you got to defend. This is going to be quite a challenge for Miami, because if they can't get this right, it's going to scream some bad news for Miami this season, isn't it?
Yeah, and I just feel like Miami. I don't know. I don't know what to think about Miami sometimes. I feel like they have the opportunity to get some good players, and sometimes I feel like the front office just misses at times. But we'll see how they make this adjustment.
Yeah, it should be really, really interesting. So you've won a Super Bowl in your career, and a lot of people, when I talk about the Super Bowl, and I look at the roster construction, the coaching staff, and the culture. You've had the pleasure of playing in a culture like Baltimore, which is tough. They're a very proud organization, and even in the AFC North. Take me back into that moment when you played up and on here, and then when you get into the big stage like the Super Bowl. You had to have been feeling everything up and in there, right? And to experience that and to win it for your team. This is kind of the ultimate goal that a lot of these players, they work hard in. They fight for every single opportunity and chance. What does it really mean to you being a Super Bowl champion, and what that takes to get and achieve the ultimate goal?
It's very familiar to me because in college I won a national championship, so it was a very similar vibe and a very similar thing where the team buys in, everybody kind of agrees like this is what we're doing, this is our mission. And I know when I got to Baltimore, because all right, so I'm gonna say in college, the year before we could have split the national championship with Florida State if they'd beat Oklahoma. But then the next year, our whole mentality was control your own destiny. I know when we did that. We all worked together. We did extra on Saturdays, and we just took care of each other on and off the field. I'm gonna say when I got to Baltimore, and especially when we got to the playoffs, around the playoffs, Ray Lewis was. I knew me coming there was part of the reason why Ray Lewis wanted me to come there, because he wanted to exit on the Super Bowl. So in my mind, that was part of my mission, is to try to make this happen for him. And then two, it got to a point where we finally got in the playoffs, because the year before we made it to the AFC Championship and we lost. Our kicker missed a field goal. A pass got dropped, and then we went for a field goal, and our kicker missed it. So we lost that way. But I remember Ray Lewis saying in the locker room, "Don't hold your heads low. We'll be back in the situation again next year." And at that point, I thought you was about to retire, but he'll be back. So we were back in that same exact situation the following year, back in New England, just with a different mindset going into the playoffs. He basically was saying no, let's not get on social media. Let's focus on each week at a time. We only got three weeks, and then you're in the Super Bowl. So 3 games. Let's focus on that. And then everybody kind of bought in. And then we did things outside of the locker room. It wasn't just about being at work. It's like, okay, outside we hung out too, and that brought the team closer. And once we got there, in my mind, I'm like, it took me 11 years to get here. So me and Ed Reed are the same year. We were the same, we came out in Miami the same year. So both of us is our first Super Bowl appearance. It's like took us both 11 years. It's like, okay, we're finally here. Let's make the most of it. And we were able to, come away with it. But it felt like I was back in college. It felt like I was in a bowl game in college, because you have the media day. They take you around, you do interviews, you do a lot of stuff leading up to it. And then like the last couple of days, it kind of buckles down, and you get like really geared into like the football and still knowing that you have the game. So it put me back into like college bowl game for a minute.
Wow.
Especially the top of the week.
Wow. That I love that. That's actually, that's got to be the best feeling up and in the world. And at least for you, it's like you've been in that big stage. And so to kind of have that amount of confidence, and also just because for some, it's like it's butterflies to them. But in the end, you get the right voices, you get the right leaders that are in there that kind of keep everybody level-headed and calm. That's the most important thing, because it's like, hey, think of it as this is another game to us. We know there's a goal involved, but that's where you got to play our game that we're used to playing, and that's what makes the huge transition from there, and what makes a huge difference. So I love that. Absolutely love that. My co-host Chase here, he was definitely waiting for this moment and excited for this interview. He did have a couple questions here to ask you as well. Fire away,
What up,
Chase.
Chase?
What up? How's it going, man?
Pretty good.
So the question I have is that since you were a Super Bowl champion with Joe Flacco and you played with him, as a Browns fan, when you look at this whole quarterback carousel that is going on in the NFL between a lot of different teams, especially the Cleveland Browns, and going from the side of an offensive lineman who has to deal with protecting the quarterbacks and learning the offensive side of the things, who do you think best fits for a team like the Cleveland Browns? Do you think Joe Flacco would be the better option, or do you think that they should go with the rookie in Shedeur Sanders?
If anything, I feel like they should start out with Joe Flacco just from experience and give Shedeur a couple games to learn, behind him to continue to learn how to be a pro. And then as they, the season progress and, Shedeur kind of learn some things, they can throw him in like, week 4 or something like that. But to start out, I would allow him to sit back and learn some things since you got Joe Flacco there.
So when you were in the NFL, what was the one thing that you were looking for a quarterback when they would come in to be in charge of the team? Like, I know that your job is to protect anybody that comes in, but like as an offensive lineman, you're like, okay, this guy is different. Like he's something that like somebody that can command the offense, can change the complexity of the team, the culture.
Yeah,
of
so
how
I
it's going to go.
can give you an example. So I think a year like 8 or 9 when I was in Minnesota, Brett Favre came in and he definitely commanded. We all knew who he was, first of all, but then he definitely commanded the offense. But he also made my job easier because he knew how to make dummy calls, just do a lot of things to play with the defense. So having him, and then when I got to year 12, I got to Miami, and I played with Tannehill. He might have been a rookie. And I was low key kind of sharing things with him at the night before dinner, like, hey, say this in your speech, hey, things like that. Like, and I could watch him as a player, like not like I knew that he was a receiver and played other positions, but I knew that he also was worried about what the coaches would say when you get back to film. So I could see the difference where in Miami he probably was a little more like hesitant to say things because there are older guys in there like me who had been in the league. Like this is my 12th year, this is first or second. So it's like he is a little nervous, but it's like this is your huddle, so you have to take command. Like we're listening to you. You're the leader. But then I felt like I seen that he got more comfortable when he went to Tennessee, and he was using more of his athletic ability when he got there. And I feel like that too can come out from a coaching, and you feel comfortable with your coaches.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Like I think that a lot of guys try to come in and demand respect and demand to be in charge rather than like earn what they do and earn the respect of the veterans. But, another thing I wanted to ask was when you look at the complexity of the offensive line going against a lot of these like athletic defensive guys, the likes of like Myles Garrett, Max Crosby's, Aaron Donald's, you had a lot of guys in your time that you were playing in the NFL. What is one thing that you would give to a lot of these new NFL offensive linemen that are coming in, going up against athletic freaks that can, either overpower them on the offensive line or beat them off the edge because they're much faster?
They really shouldn't beat you off the edge if you're home, put it that way. If you're home because you know the snap count. And if you feel like they're getting a jump, tell your quarterback to change up the snap count. You know what I mean? So at home, you have, to me, I feel like the offensive lineman has the advantage. I feel like a lot of guys tend to, when a guy does get a good jump on the ball, they get nervous and they tend to go out towards the person. But you got to remember his angle. So it's like set straight back because it's the angle he has to meet. But if you're going out towards him, you're creating more space between you and the guard. And then your angle's probably off too, instead of like setting back vertical and trying to cut him off at the point where he has to make contact with you. So that's where a lot of guys go wrong, is trying to jump out there fast or open up too fast. When they kick slide, they open up too fast, and it makes a shorter corner and a quicker way to get to the quarterback. So those are things that they can watch on film and correct if they really know how to watch film too. And that's another thing, is that I don't know if a lot of guys watch film like they should or know exactly how to watch film.
Exactly. No, I growing up as a Browns fan, I got the benefit of watching one of the greatest left tackles play in the NFL in Joe Thomas.
Mhm.
and seeing how he, talks about the offensive line and like things that they're supposed to do and like how he helps out these young guys. And then some people just, take what he says and tries to make it. And then other people take what he says and just like, yeah, I'm going to do my own thing. I don't really care what you have to say. And like,
My thing is
you're not listening to one of the greats. Like what?
right. And when I played, I watched certain people, and I didn't do everything they did. Like, but I felt like Walter Jones had great hands. So there was a period of time where I was studying his hand movements, and I was take part of that from him, and then I would watch something from like Orlando Pace and add that to me. Like I would take pieces of things because I'm still going to do what I can do. But then there's some things from them that I see that I like that I'm like, okay, let me try this too.
Now, the last question before we leave, it's going to be a fun one. Out of all of the teams that you played with, who do you think is going to win a Super Bowl first before, the end of the season? Or like by the end of the season?
I mean, I feel like out of the teams that I played for, who would be the favorite to win is probably the Ravens. They just added DeAndre Hopkins too. They've been close a few times. Just can't get over the hump. But I feel like they've been the closest. The Vikings have had great records, but it's like they keep losing in the first round of the playoffs. I need them to get past the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, I do too. Well, I mean, that's all I had for a few questions, man. I just wanted to get your opinion on a few things and also, get some of the young viewers that may be watching the show to get a little bit more information about what an NFL offensive lineman has to deal with and, the different aspects of what could make you great, not just going from the NFL. I mean, because you started off like just like everybody else in playing in like Pop Warner football, going up to high school, going up to college.
I didn't play till high school.
You never played till high school. So you started off like everybody else playing in high school football and then worked your way up to college. So like to everybody out there who, was able to watch you play as going up to a Super Bowl champion, this was very great for them to be able to see.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Bryant, appreciate you really for taking the time to coming up on here and just giving, the best stuff, especially for a lot of these youngsters watching up and on the show that tune in all the time and learning from an absolute great and somebody too is a great mentor. Appreciate you for coming on by and sharing us with your thoughts on this. And congratulations once again on being the Ring of Honor inductee here for the University
October 25th.
Yes, we are. I'm definitely tuning in up and on that, man. Appreciate you for coming on by. One time for the U, my friend. There it is. Appreciate you. Take care of yourself and enjoy the rest of the week, my friend.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely. Man, what a great one, man.
Yeah.
And listen, this is the thing is you learn a lot from just the pros. And it's, to think of this because it's funny. We've had a wide receiver, couple wide receivers, running back, defensive tackle, and we get a chance to really talk with a former offensive lineman. And I'm sure one of the other things too, it could have asked about, but how important that it is when it comes to the quarterback's cadence. Because that is one of the biggest things. If you got, a Mike linebacker or you got a Mike safety out there that's coming in and they're coming in a blitz package, because we see this with Kansas City all the time, and how Steve Spagnuolo really puts that together. That becomes a big difference maker, especially the tackle, the guard, and even the one that's very vocal with the center. So that is an interesting thing, but I thought that was fantastic. And man,
no, I did too. Like I enjoyed that interview and like just getting the insight on, what an NFL offensive lineman has to do and like the different aspects that what their mindset is, what they think about and everything, and how they interact with like rookies or, different quarterbacks that they've played with and, things like that. Because like, he never got the chance to play with the rookie or other than Tannehill and everything. But like, he goes and plays with a lot of these veteran guys, like, the Brett Favres, the Joe Flaccos and everything. So like he never really got a chance to play with, a up and coming star rookie like a Joe Burrow or anything. So like I wanted to pick his mind and say like, hey, how much of a difference does it make having a guy who knows what they're doing, but can demand and command the offense, or having a veteran on the team that's just like, all right, here's what you got to do.
Yeah, because that's important, and that's why. And it's funny because, I mean, off the air, I mean, we hear it from a lot of people. People think that, like, offensive firepower is the be all end all. Not if you're watching teams like Baltimore's, the Chargers, the Chiefs, all these teams that they invested. I mean, we're seeing this now with Chicago. I'm curious to what the Chicago offensive line is going to look like. But they invest that money in the right places because they want their quarterbacks to work. When you're putting together so much money in your franchise quarterback, it's important to protect them. But it's also important when you establish a healthy run game and when you have the right, running backs, even running back by committee types, it really simplifies a lot more of the offense. And it's a lot of the duties, the tasks, and the objectives of what it means to be a part of an offensive line group. So, yeah, and these are guys. These are big guys. These are guys that work a lot with their footwork. They work a lot with their hand placement, and same with snap counts and cadences. Because, again, it's like, I mean, you know this as somebody that works in, as a first response. I mean, you got to be the first line of defense there. That's the same thing when you look at it from an offensive line. You're the first line of defense from there. You got to protect and you got to open up those gaps to at least keep the run game efficient. So, yeah.
Looks like the Panthers are taking the lead 3-1 in the series. Like, they're almost done.
Yeah. Like I said, I was not surprised.
Like it's the end of the first. They still got 2 more quarters, but it's 3-0 right now. So
yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean, this Panthers team is just too good. And I think a lot of that is that was just a match made in heaven for Paul Maurice.
When's the last time we had a back-to-back NL or NHL championship?
Tampa Bay Lightning. Sure enough, another Florida team. And it's just like, I'm telling you, 6 straight years of nothing but Florida hockey. Okay, whether you're in Tampa or you're up in down in South Beach, it's just hockey is just great in Florida. It's really interesting from there. But
it's weird that a team like Florida or like a state like Florida is producing hockey championships.
I think it just goes to show you. And look, I'm not trying to throw shade at the state at the country of Canada, but it just goes to show you a lot of these teams in the States, including Florida. I mean, they're mass producing a lot of these really good players, and they're attacking the free agency and the trade markets, especially with the LTIRs. Whenever you have that player that comes in and goes into the LTIR with an injury, that's opening up cap. That's what most people don't realize. And then you go and get these players like a Brad Marchand. I thought that was going to be a weird fit, but he proved me wrong. I mean, I ultimately it's because he's a part of an overly offensive firepower like what Florida's put together. I mean, look, I watched Paul Maurice in Winnipeg. Okay, and he produced a very good team. But this was match made in heaven because you've had the pleasure of coaching 2 Vezina Trophy winners between Connor Hellebuck, who, by the way, wins another Vezina Trophy today, and he's also the Hart Trophy winner. So he's the MVP. And yet, still having a hard time getting over the hump. But besides that, you had another Vezina Trophy winner in Sergei Bobrovsky. So it's like everything just works.
And I will say, like, kudos to the Dallas Star for making it as far as you did. Like I picked you guys to win it all and go all the way. Like, they weren't that far off. They just need a couple more pieces and they can make it.
Well, and again, they're going to have an interesting situation because now with Pete DeBoer fired, I don't know how they're going to figure that out. And again, these are not easy replacements. And the heftiness of coaches now is it's thin. So you're expecting a guy coming in from the AHL to now come in as the next prominent protege. How difficult does that got to be? So I don't know. But by the way, Anaheim Ducks just ended up landing Chris Kreider. So already with Joel Quenneville making his impact, they go and get a very good offensive scorer to finally help Trevor Zegras and Troy Terry. They're finally getting help. And this Ducks team has just been so disappointing since they last won the Cup. I never understood it.
Yeah. When did the Ducks win it? Early 2000s?
Yeah, so it was I think it was 2000. It was somewhere in like it's like it had to have been like somewhere like around like the 07, 08 team. But yeah, it's been a long time. And remember, that was young Ryan Getzlav and Corey Perry, who's in it right now.
It's been a long time since the Red Wings have won too, which I'm a fan of the Red Wings. So
it has. And, that's why I'm like, hopefully the Ducks can really make some shakeups because they've needed to for quite a long time.
Ducks were my favorite team, or not my favorite, my second favorite, just because of the TV show. I was a big fan of the cartoon TV series and everything, and like just the way that the logo looked and everything was pretty freaking cool. Like a hockey mask in the shape of a duck bill with hockey sticks behind it, dude. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. Well, at least we got through a hefty show here today, and it's only going to get crazier from here tomorrow on a Freaky Friday. But appreciate everybody for stopping on by. Shout out to Justin Garcia, Locked On Bucks, talking about the Milwaukee Bucks and the Giannis situation. At least we've got some clarity up from there. Gabby Maljanian of Locked On Red Sox. I'm really excited for Roman Anthony, and I think he's going to have a prominent future. And then, of course, the best for last. Former offensive lineman, Bryant McKinnie. Great stuff. Absolutely loved a lot of his experience that he shared here on the show. Appreciate everyone for coming on by here tonight. Catch us tomorrow night. And also, to catch you up to speed on all of our episodes, the Snake Sports Talk Show website is available and online now. So check out all of our latest blogs, our latest episodes, our latest interviews, because we'll have those all up to date, and our latest audio podcast as well. Get you closer to the show. If you got a review or response, or hey, even just a shout out, message us, send us your name, your location, and message us here on the snakesportstalkshow.com. That's the snakesportstalkshow.com, and also merchandises. I can't forget that. We got a lot of merchandises online and ready to order here today. So check it out here, snakesportstalkshow.com. Chase and myself, we are out of here. I appreciate all of you guys for tuning on in on a fun show here tonight, and we'll see you guys tomorrow night on the Snake Sports Talk Show. Take care, everyone.